Coming back with the second part of the lecture on the Yugoslav attack. And for this part, for you guys, I'm going to show you a game that was in the main line of the Soltis variation, which I briefly mentioned in the first part. And so e4, e5, c5, knight f3, d6, d4. And we get to the familiar position here. The g6, bishop e3, and bishop g7. I'm not sure if I mentioned this trap in the first video, but black cannot play knight g4 here because it's met by bishop b5 check. And then no matter how black blocks, for example, if he goes bishop d7, queen takes g4, just wins a piece. And the same goes for knight to d7, because then the knight on g4 is undefended. And so, for example, knight g4, bishop b5 check, and knight c6. Well, in that case, we just take the knight, and after pawn retakes, we have this this double attack on the king, the check, taking the rook. So I hope you can follow that. And then bishop g7 therefore is the main line. f3, knight c6, queen d2, castle, bishop c4. So this is the starting point of the Yugoslav attack that we should be very familiar with this setup. And bishop d7 is the main line. Now in the first video, we looked at the game between Bobby Fischer and Larson, where Larson took the knight on d4, bishop takes, then he followed up with bishop e6 and queen a5. And I just wanted to cover that game first because it's a useful sideline that you're going to have to know if you play this line for white. Now, bishop d7 was played in this game, and I have a game here between Zahar Efemenko and Alexander Arenshchenko, played in 2001, and both players are grandmasters. They're not well known, but I found this game on a database, and I chose it for a specific reason, is because it shows one of the main lines of the Soltis variation. So black plays rook c8 here, which is the main move, and a lot of times, and you'll see knight e5, this move where it doesn't matter that much. For example, knight e5, bishop b3, and rook c8 is going to transpose to our main position anyway. So white can really choose between knight e5 first or rook c8. So I chose rook c8. And here you want to play bishop b3. And that's mainly because, black was threatening to take the knight and then take the bishop on c4. Or you would have had to retake with the queen, where there would be other tactics. So bishop b3 is a good move. Knight e5. This is the typical middle game plan that black's trying to achieve with the dragon, is putting the knight on c4 here, in combination with control of the c file. Normally, like we saw in the other game, the queen goes to a5 in many lines, and the a and b pawns are going to start rolling down the board. So after knight e5, h4, that's the main move. But I think actually more popular these days is just going king b1 first, and then either going h4 or g4 later on. But king b1 is sort of the safer option. It's called the Karpov variation. And I think h4 is just makes for a more entertaining game for both sides. I mean, the game can become very tactical, whereas with king b1, white is more of on a long-range plan, long-term plan. and is trying to get out of tactics, because a lot of times there'll be piece sacrifices, rook sacrifices, just to it's a lot of tactics you have to be aware of, but that's what also makes games fun. So h4, h5, that's a familiar theme that we were talking about in the other video, and we looked at some sidelines. Black normally wants to meet h4 with h5 in almost every situation in this defense, and the main move here is bishop g5. So now that we've created this little hole on g5, we use it for the bishop, and black responds with the rook lift, rook c5. Now this is the main line of the Soltis variation here. G4 here. Now f4 is also very playable, but f4, while it is very solid, it's not considered as good by theory as pawn sacrifice g4. So we're sacrificing a pawn to open this h file, and now comes f4, and typically you see the knight go to c4. That was pretty much the plan, and this is what happened in the game. And queen e2, there's other options here, but queen e2 is considered to be the best move by theory, and mainly because it, you can see it puts pressure here, and it keeps an eye on this pawn as well. The queen is pretty good on e2, and we'll see why later. And b5 is a good move, and this is kind of the very old school way of playing this line with black. Now there are two other options besides b5 that we're going to talk about in later games. One of them is knight a5. I think Kramnik was responsible for that novelty, and Tivyakov's move queen c8, and both of those moves are very good. But you see there's a threat to the knight, and that has to be dealt with somehow, either by defending the knight like this, adding a defender like this, or simply moving the knight and attacking that bishop. So those are the three moves we're going to focus on these last three videos. This video will be, of course, about b5, and then the next two will deal with queen c8 and knight a5. So b5 here, and it was played in f5 exclam. That's how you want to meet this. You're trying to attack on the opposite side of the board as black, and you're trying to go tit for tat. After takes, bishop takes here, which is good. And after bishop retook, white took on f5 here. Rook takes on f5, and instead of taking the rook, which is probably playable, the better move here is definitely queen takes g4, check. Rook g5. So the problem here is that if the bishop goes to g7, then rook g1 is very good. So rook g5 here loses the rook, and bishop takes g4. So white loses the whole queen, but I think there's white's gonna get a strong attack regardless. After takes on f6 here, bishop takes the rook. Now this is already a slight mistake. I think it was better to take the pawn, but still here, rook gg1 for example, f5, rook h5, and so we're going after this pawn, and this is already looks like black's on thin ice in this line also. But after after bishop takes d1, so black takes the rook here, takes the gamble, knight c6 attacks the queen, and then the next move is kind of shocking. You would expect the queen to move, but bishop 3 was played, counterattacking the rook. And let's see what happens if queen d7, because it looks more of like an intuitive move. But actually, after knight takes e7, black has no choice but to take. You see all these pawns are covered, or all these squares are covered. And the king has nowhere to go, so the queen has to sacrifice herself. And after this, white's winning. So bishop f3 was played in the game, but again, knight takes e7, and it's the same scenario where the queen has to sacrifice herself either time. But here we can go rook g1, check. King has to go to h8 or h7, and f takes e7, so we take the queen back. And after rook e8, just knight takes b5. So the knight moves because it doesn't have a defender anymore. But now we take on d6 here. Rook takes e7, rook f1, king g8 was played. Knight takes f7, rook takes f7, king d2, bishop e4. And now just takes, knight takes, c4. Pretty self-explanatory. I think rook f4 probably could have been played instead just as easily. I probably would have played rook f4 here. But white is still winning pretty much no matter what. Here, king c3, bishop b7 here, and then just rook e1, which is a silent deadly move because it cuts off the king, and there's no way that these pawns are not going to roll down the board, especially when this king can't get over to help. So the rook and the king and the 3 pawns are just going to march, and it's probably game over. Black resigned in this position, but I think he should have played maybe on a little bit more. I would have played on. But that was the game, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let's recap just a little bit. So just remember, things to remember is, if they go knight g4, bishop b5, you win. And the main line here, remember, is bishop d7. However, this line where they can trade off the knight, you'll have to know, in which your strategy is pretty similar to what happens in the main line. You want to play h4, h5, and open the h file, and try to start an attack. And in this line, so this is one of the main lines here, you just have to remember, this bishop g5 move, this rook lift is the main move, and there's other moves besides this too. Here, queen a, they could play queen a5 first easily, but rook c5, this little pawn sack to open the h file, and then queen e2 puts pressure on the knight. They defend with b5. You go f5 here, and so this game is pretty typical of what could happen. You just have to remember these tactics with the knight. And it's okay to sacrifice your queen in this line, this specific line, but you have to make sure that it's working tactically, and in this game it did. Thank you guys.